are all aware, and hopefully most of you are aware, that we announced our plans for the spring term at the end of this past October, including our modified academic calendar, plans for campus operations and events with an eye all toward COVID-19 prevention and responses in our response plan. So we knew there were going to be probably lots of questions from you all. And so we wanted to bring in our wonderful colleagues from around the college to help answer some questions and provide some updates for you all. And as I said, this session will be recorded and we will have it on the resources students and family members, just so that you'll have it for future reference. For today, I just want to give you a little bit also of the format of our session, which has been held as a webinar, which means that we're in listen mode only, with the ability to ask questions through the chat function of our session today. So if you have questions for the panel members, please type them in the chat box. You'll again find that at the bottom of the screen there. We will be addressing questions during this session. We will also address them privately as well as they come in via chat. And if we're not able to answer those questions, we'll also forward them to the appropriate resource, so that way you'll be able to get an answer from folks. Today's session will be focused around the academics, whether that's registering for classes, course formats, finals, thesis, senior celebration. Obviously, you want to know about COVID, so we'll be talking a bit about COVID guidelines for returning back to campus this spring. You'll also talk a little bit about student engagement programming, and then also how to plan for the summer, and probably a bit more things there as well. So we'll be spending 60 minutes together. And as I said, if we're unable to answer all your questions, please do follow up with us at student-life@reed.edu, and we'll make sure someone gets back to you. And so we'll make sure that that's in the chat function, so you'll be able to have that email directly for you. As I said, I'll be moderating today. And so I want to go ahead and have our wonderful colleagues here at the college go ahead and introduce themselves. If you would, please introduce your name, title, and your pronouns.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Alice Hara. I direct the Center for Life Beyond Reed, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, everyone. I'm Britt Q. Hoover. I am the Assistant Dean for Student Support at Reed, and I use she, her pronouns.
Susie, you're muted.
My space bar didn't work. I'm Susie Wren. I'm a professor in biology. I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Hugh Porter, Vice President for College Relations and Planning. He, his pronouns.
Hi, I'm Julie Maxfield. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Associate Dean of Students for Academic Life. And this is Stella. I can't do anything about it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Madison Reithman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an epidemiologist and the college's COVID-19 response coordinator.
Good afternoon. I'm Nora McLaughlin. I'm the registrar at Reed, and I use she, her pronouns.
And we will at some point have Amy Shuckman, who's our Associate Dean of Students for Student and Campus Life, join us to talk a little bit about programming as we get through our program today. So I want to get us started and talk a little bit about COVID operations and student support. And so I'm going to ask that Hugh Porter, who is co-chairing our Reed's COVID risk assessment group, and Madison Reithman, our new COVID coordinator, to discuss our approach and experiences that we've had this fall and our spring plans for testing, tracing, and training, and some other related topics. Hugh?
Thanks. Really nice to be here with all of you today. As Carnell said, I co-chair the COVID risk assessment group, which has been meeting weekly and emailing frequently in between things ever since August. We've done our work as described on our website, and feel good about the way we've been able to handle requests and respond to situations as they've developed. And we think about things in these four big groups that I've talked about before. So number one, public health. We're fortunate to be in a state with an excellent public health authority and in a county with a responsive public health apparatus as well. And we pay close attention to both of the health authority directives, what they're publishing on the their COVID websites, which I expect many of you have consulted. Secondly, campus health. Campus health, we have two big resources for this. Number one is testing, which Madison will be talking more about. And number two is our daily health check survey. So I'm on campus today. When I came in this morning, I needed to fill out my health check survey, which confirmed that I was healthy and could come to campus. And if I reported symptoms, they would have directed me to take other actions. Thirdly, personal behaviors. I think this was the thing that everybody thought would be impossible in the era of COVID, and we've paid close attention to what's going on in terms of all of our compliance with the most important protocols for preventing the spread of COVID, which is wearing a mask and keeping social distance, physical distance. And we have a weekly survey that goes out to everybody on campus, and we can all fill it out and say, this is what I'm seeing around me. This is what we'd like the risk assessment group to consider. And finally, campus supplies. Do we have testing, gloves, masks, cleaning supplies, everything else that we need to create a safe campus environment? So with that overview, I'm going to turn things over to Madison. We're really happy that she's joined us. She's added a lot to our work, particularly in communications. The dashboard is something that we had aspired to create, but until Madison arrived, we couldn't. And I would urge all of you who are wondering what's going on campus to look at the Read COVID dashboard on the website, as well as the weekly communications that now Madison is drafting. So Madison.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Hugh. And, I have been with Read since September, so right about the start of the fall semester, and have really just been so impressed with the way that Read has designed their COVID response and how they've been able to adapt operations to be able to continue doing the important work of an academic institution in light of the challenges that we face. So I'm going to talk through a little bit in more detail some of the things that we are doing on campus in order to prevent COVID or identify it quickly and respond to it appropriately. But certainly if you have additional questions or more detail, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat or follow up with us afterwards, and I'm happy to talk through these things in more detail. So first, I'll start off with one of the things that seems to be on the forefront of everybody's mind, which is testing. So we are currently conducting around 1,150 tests per week on campus. We even have the capacity to do more than that and are expecting to keep that same level or an increased level going into the spring. On-campus students are tested twice weekly, either on Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday. This is because on-campus students live in a congregate setting, and we want to be able to capture cases as quickly as possible. So testing twice a week really gives us a very narrow window that somebody could be contagious and potentially exposing others before we detect them. So it really minimizes the risk that is posed to the community if a positive case is identified. Select faculty, staff, and vendors are tested once weekly. This includes all faculty who are teaching in person, includes our Bon Appetit cafeteria staff. It includes those staff that work most closely with others, like community safety officers or our staff who work in residence halls, our library staff. Like I said, those who really are at higher risk of interfacing with others through the nature of their job. We also select about a random sample of about 200 students a week who live off campus but access campus regularly. It's looking like that it's about 1/3 of that population right now. And like I said, those are tested one time weekly. Looking ahead towards next week and the end of this semester, we will also be opening up testing next week for 5 days, so Monday through Friday, to all students, whether they live on campus or off campus, so that they can come into campus and get a test prior to leaving campus for this period of time for winter break. We also have something set up where the individuals can actually log into an online portal and check their results within 36 hours of a test and usually have results back. Sometimes results can take up to 48 hours to return, but overall, we are pretty impressed with that turnaround time. 48 hours for a COVID PCR is pretty remarkable. So like I said, all students will be able to sign up for a test. They'll get an invite next week. And then they can select what day and time they'd like to test going into the Thanksgiving break in order to ensure that they can have a test completed before they leave. So moving on to talk a little bit about the fall experience, the end of this semester, and planning for the spring. This semester, we really worked to make the testing process as seamless as possible. We understand that schedules change and that it can be a complication to add testing into your normal routine. So for those students, staff, and faculty who've been having challenges making testing or working it into their schedule, we've been following up pretty directly to the point of one-on-one phone conversations with individuals who have been struggling with testing to make sure that we come up with the appropriate accommodations and setup to get everybody participating in testing as needed. Over winter break, we will be limiting access to campus to those who have been requested and approved. Any student who wanted to retain access to campus for a variety of reasons was able to request such in partnership with a staff or faculty member. Once approved, that also put them in the pool for surveillance testing, which is going to continue over winter break. It will just be at a much smaller scale because our activities on campus are going to be greatly reduced. Looking to the spring, we are going to ask that all students complete a 2-week quarantine prior to their return to Reed. We are flexible on where this happens. So for off-campus students, they can complete that at their Reed area home, or if they would like to complete that at a family home or a different location, they're able to do that as well. The goal of this quarantine is really just to have 2 weeks where everybody is really limiting their interactions with others. So that when they come back to campus, we do have a reasonable security blanket, in preventing exposures. Before individuals are allowed to continue on campus operations for the spring, we do also ask that they have a negative test completed through Reed prior to that time. So we will have 4 pretty rigorous testing days where we'll be testing from 8 o'clock a.m. to 3 p.m. As we are facilitating students for move-in and return to campus operations. And so we will be providing quite a bit of testing that will be available to students at that time. Once again, the test turnaround should be about 36 to 48 hours. So we just ask that students quarantine in that time until they receive a negative test. Moving on to some other things we're doing to prepare for spring. One of those is training. So as many of you might have known, we did a kind of COVID training at the beginning of the fall semester, which was really designed to inform people about the basics of COVID and then what we were doing on campus and what we were going to ask of our population. We are going to ask that everybody complete this training again at the beginning of the spring semester. It will be an updated training to include some updated guidance and evidence that we've obtained through this time, as well as updated recommendations and policies and protocols that we have on campus surrounding our operations. This training will be sent via email before the start of the spring semester, so keep an eye out for that. Another piece of our COVID response on campus is surrounding our public health behaviors and the expectations and enforcement of those. The baseline of our COVID response, really the cornerstone of it, is those basic things we keep talking about over and over. It's the masking, the social distancing, the limiting your group interactions and activities. And all of these things are included in our public health behaviors guidelines. They are included in our on and off campus student agreements, which are signed at the beginning of the year. And we really do keep these in the forefront of our mind when we're looking at activities and operations. Our kind of core message is be kind and remind. We really encourage everyone on campus to help us maintain safety in our community by just encouraging others to be wearing their masks and to be social distancing and to do it in a non-confrontational kind way so that we can overall build a supportive environment when it comes to these public health behaviors. When a simple reminder such as that is not enough, we are happy to also work with students one-on-one or to set them up with campus health promotion peer advisors that we have available. And in more extreme but rare circumstances, we do have an enforcement protocol where if we have repeat behavioral problems when it comes to these public health behaviors, we are able to follow up in a more direct fashion through an enforcement protocol. Hugh made mention of our dashboard. We are very happy to have this rolled out now. We used to go through all of our metrics in our weekly report in a narrative format, but we found that our community was really looking for more interactive and more detailed information, which we are now able to provide through our Reed dashboard. So it is available to the general public on our Reed COVID response page. So I encourage everybody to take a look at that. We update that at a minimum weekly on Fridays, but as more information is received, we will update it more frequently sometimes. We also, like I mentioned, have weekly updates from our COVID risk assessment group. Those are sent out via email on Fridays and are also posted for everybody to see on our COVID communications website. In between these times, we also have many ad hoc updates and communications that are sent out via email. All of those updates are also stored on that communications page and accessible to everybody online. And then finally, going into a little bit of our contact tracing and case investigation processes, we do have a very close partnership with the Multnomah County Health Department, which is our local health jurisdiction. However, we have an internal program to be able to do case investigations and contact tracing for cases associated with Reed. And this is really driven by the need to have a quick response and also a very specific response on campus. Nobody really knows the Reed community better than the Reed community members. So while our local health jurisdiction is very effective and very strong in their contact tracing and case investigation processes, the team that we have here who is able to interview cases, identify contacts, and recommend isolation and quarantine effectively is really specific to the layout and the flow and the restrictions here on campus. We really know the specifics of how operations are here on campus, and that allows us to design a very specialized approach. One of the things I do want to touch on a bit is our recommendation of quarantine. So if we have a case on campus and we identify contacts who were potentially exposed to that case, we will recommend a 2-week quarantine based on their last exposure. But I do want to make mention that we do not recommend quarantine lightly. While we want to make sure that we minimize the risk of infectious disease on campus, we also want to make sure that we are not assigning or asking people to quarantine unnecessarily, because we do recognize the burden that has on the other aspects of life on campus. So we have a very thorough process where we will consult with several different individuals when it comes to making a quarantine decision and do so not lightly. So lastly, and kind of as a segue over to our next panelist, I just wanted to touch a little bit on our spring plans. We will be continuing testing, the enforcement of our public health behaviors, and encouraging those, our faculty and staff to come up with good and innovative ways to do remote class operations and support. We will continue to expand our support for quarantine and isolation, as well as contact tracing. And we will be evaluating and updating our data collection methods, our indicators, and our metrics as new evidence comes to light about COVID-19. And all of this to say is that COVID is ever changing and our understanding of it is ever changing. So we will be adapting our guidance, our protocols and policies to reflect that in order to develop an evidence-based response. So with that, I will hand it back over to Carnell to introduce our next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you, Madison and Hugh. Britt Hoover, who's our Assistant Dean for Student Support, has actually been overseeing Reed's Isolation and Quarantine Student Support Program. So Britt, would you mind sharing a little bit about how you've been working with our students who have symptoms or who have tested positive or who have been identified as a close contact of a person who may have tested positive for COVID? So take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. So during the spring 2021 semester, we will continue to operate a holistic and supportive isolation and quarantine program for students. For students who test positive for COVID-19, they will be instructed to isolate by the Health and Counseling Center. Students who live on campus who need to isolate are temporarily relocated to a designated residence hall. And while they're in isolation in that residence hall, they'll receive delivered meals through our wellness meal delivery program. Students who live off campus who test positive for COVID-19 should plan to isolate in their off-campus residence. All students in isolation, whether they live on campus or off campus, receive dedicated academic and personal support and regular consultation with a member of the Health and Counseling Center's medical team. We regularly check in with these students via phone, email, text, a combination thereof, and we help them connect to virtual well-being resources like counseling and yoga activities you can do in your room, and help them connect to their friends and social group virtually during this time that they are in isolation. For students who may have been exposed to someone who tested positive for COVID-19, we will instruct them to quarantine. Students who are instructed to quarantine due to this potential exposure will quarantine in their current room assignment, either on campus or off campus, but they too are provided active support during their time in quarantine, which is normally a period of 14 days. Students in isolation and quarantine are unable to attend in-person classes or work, meetings, or social events until they're formally cleared to do so by the HCC. But students who feel well enough can and do continue classes and work remotely. Faculty have been supremely supportive of helping students in isolation and quarantine participate in classes virtually until they're cleared and able to return to the classroom. And this will continue during the spring semester. Just want to also mention for non-COVID concerns and challenges, the Read Care team continues to provide proactive support and guidance to students. Students, faculty, staff, and family members can refer a student to the care team by filling out an online care referral form or emailing the care team at careteam@read.edu. I'll drop this contact information in the chat box in a moment.
Thank you, Britt. So I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk a little and have our panelists talk a little bit about the academic program, support and experiences. And again, this is more focused on the calendar, the academic program, supports there. So I'd like to invite Nora, who's our registrar, to talk about fall and spring dates, deadlines, in the academic calendar.
Good afternoon. Well, we're excited to open up spring registration on Monday. We've updated the spring schedule as we did in fall to allow for more time between classes, and departments have indicated the instructional mode for their classes, and they've updated class sizes and all of that to comply appropriately with COVID precautions. Students are being advised this week. They can meet with their advisors, discuss their spring classes, and verify whether they're in the right classes, whether they need to make changes. Most of our students register for 2 semesters at a time, but things have changed and some of them change their minds, and we provide this opportunity for them to do that update. First year students, just like the continuing students, meeting with their advisors this week remotely. And we have a solar registration pin. So before they can register, make changes, they do get that from their advisor. They'll be able to see the changes to their schedule in Iris, which is our portal for them to see their record, and changes to the class schedule in the class schedule page. The class schedule page is open to everyone. There they can search for class open spots, classes that meet particular college requirements, and that sort of thing. So once they have their PIN, they've looked at their schedule, Monday we will open up registration, and they can go ahead and update their schedule. We also will look at those numbers to see if we have areas where there's some pinch, areas that we need to reach back out to departments and see if we have some gaps we need to fill. The course formats for spring, very much like in the fall, we'll have a mix of in-person and online. The numbers are a little bit higher for online in the spring. So a slightly higher number of online, or online with an optional in-person component. And that's where a department or an instructor might have something that students don't have to attend, but they could attend in person. About 31% of our students will be in person or in person with remote access. So it's still a good blend. One of the things that the departments have been paying special attention to is to make sure, because some of our students can only attend online, that we don't have courses that a student will need to progress toward the degree that aren't offered online. So we look carefully at that. The fall deadlines, fall is winding down. We still have that mix of instructional modes through the end of next week. So a week from Friday, then we have a fall break, much needed, I think, by everyone, certainly the faculty and students, and that will be the week of Thanksgiving. So for the first time in my time at Reed, our students will actually have the entire Thanksgiving week off. So no classes, no meetings, that sort of thing. After fall break, all the classes are online. So classes are resumed November 30th, and the last day of classes is December 7th. Fall theses are due the last Friday of the semester, so December 4th, and then finals will end on December 15th. The spring schedule we've updated, the academic calendar is online, and you can have a look at that. starting January 25th as originally planned, but moving spring break later in the term, April 10 through 18. So students will not need to travel back and forth. After spring break, again, classes will be held online. Seniors will be able to continue their thesis work in Portland if that's where they are. This won't be like last spring where we had to close everything down. We hope, as long as things stay as they are. Theses will be due on the last day of classes, which is April 30th. Final exams will end May 13th. So the spring schedule is much as it was, with the exception of moving that spring break a little bit later so that we don't have students traveling back and forth. So we're looking forward to working with students to get their spring registration updated and working on ways to take in theses in a way that's safe and celebrates our seniors. And that's what I have for the schedule and for registration.
Thank you, Nora. Julie, can you talk a little bit about, and by the way, Julie is our Associate Dean for Students for Academic Support and providing and overseeing disability and accessibility resources, international student services, and also academic support. Can you share how these offices are working to support our students during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello again. So I guess I'll start with international students and say we have international students here in Portland. We have international students in other countries attending Reed at present. And so it's been a real challenge to figure out how to support people virtually, and we've been adapting programming accordingly. Some additional resources we're providing right now for international students. Housing, if we're housing anyone, we're housing international students should they need it. So through breaks and that sort of thing, that's a resource we can offer. The mentorship program for first year international students that normally ends at the end of fall is going to be continued into the spring so that first years who are still getting to know Reed can have that support. And then we're going to do a new orientation, a sort of reorientation for any international students that are able to arrive physically on campus for the first time in the spring. They're going to need different kinds of support in getting to know this place. So those are a few examples, but we've got a lot of eyes on that population and desire to support them. The other areas I oversee are academic support and disability and accessibility resources. And I'll just say that the pandemic and learning this way is creating the need for everyone to develop new skills, and especially folks that were learning new skills about college all along, right? So we've seen a lot of interest in coaching, which is an individualized approach to what a student needs and setting goals for that individual student. We've moved all of our tutoring online, so that's still 100% accessible whether you're on campus or not. Workshops are online, that sort of thing. And then from the disability and accessibility resources angle, one thing we've noticed is that stress exacerbates existing symptoms. So folks are asking for more help, asking for more accommodations, and we've got that ready for them. So sometimes it's a student who didn't use accommodations until they got to college, and they didn't think they needed them, now they do, and that's okay. So that office is there to support folks in addition to the new needs that they may have, right? So taking a screen break is now a thing that exists. So I think all those offices are remaining nimble, as all of student life is really, and the entire campus, remaining nimble as we adjust to what students are needing now and then now again.
Thank you. So we know that, planning for the experience of teaching in person during a pandemic is a new experience for all folks in academics. And then as Nora mentioned, Reed is conducting classes in a variety of ways, in a variety of formats, including in-person, hybrid, remote. So I'd like to invite Susie, who's a professor of biology, to share her experiences around teaching science during COVID and how she's using her campus classroom as a way to engage.
Thanks, Carnell. So this is always really hard for me, like talking to an audience that I can't even see. So I have been teaching mostly in person this semester. I have one large in-person class that has a remote option. So there's a few students who are in on Zoom. I have another class that is very hybrid, and it's sort of half and half with in-person and remote students. And on any given week, I'm not sure which ones are going to show up in person and which ones are going to show up online. So I can talk a little bit about both of those experiences from my perspective, and hopefully capture a little bit of what I think the students are feeling. I would say the one word that I've heard Julie just say was the word nimble. And that has kind of been a key thing this semester. And I've seen a few questions go by in the chat also asking about how students were sort of frustrated that some things that said they were going to be in person turned out to be more online than they expected. And I think that's true for faculty also. We had visions of what was going to happen, and then reality, somehow didn't make that possible or didn't make it actually effective. And so for those classes that transitioned to being more online, it was in the most part because that's how the faculty felt that they could deliver the information to the most students and actually have the most student engagement. I've really opted for the in-person and emphasizing that. I teach in a big, I keep doing funny motions, a big wide room. It's huge. And I wish I knew how big it was from side to side. And so there's 6 students across and 3 deep. But in order to talk to them, I have to walk back and forth. And I've got 2 whiteboards and I've got 2 projector screens. And when I want to do student activities, since they can't huddle together, instead I bring these whiteboards and I put them in between the columns of students. And there's sort of 3 students on each side of a whiteboard with 1 student writing on the pen with the pen and doing whatever the students tell them to do. And then at the end, we bring those boards back up to the front of the room. And then because the students over there can't see the whiteboard, I have to use the camera to zoom in on it so it's projected up above. So all of this takes a bit of time. And it turns out I can't cover as much material as I used to. In fact, I've covered maybe 1/3 of my syllabus. So somebody asked about a syllabus. If I had given you a syllabus at the beginning of the semester, you would laugh that we would be partway into it, that we haven't covered the same amount of material. But I think we've talked more about approaches to science and the questions that we're asking and how we ask them and what sorts of questions they are. And so we're learning science in a kind of different way in the classroom. In the lab, similarly, we've had to de-densify the labs. And so instead of having 16 students in a room, I have 8 students in a room, which means I'm in that room a lot more afternoons than I used to be. But when I have 8 students there, I've actually found it amazing that I can talk to all 8 of them instead of having 16, doing stuff all at once. We've also done a lot of stuff where we have put some of the techniques on video so that the students don't have to be huddled around watching a demonstration, but they can watch it on their own. Or what I've found is that they kind of work in pairs with one watching it on their phone and telling the other student what to do. And they've actually done techniques that I used to do myself. And I would just sort of tell them what I was going to do and I would do it some other time. But because they have this moment-to-moment instruction, they're using equipment that I normally wouldn't have had them accessing. So it's been interesting to see these things change, and it's been a lot of fun. We also, I guess I've had one student comment to me that she actually usually hated this group work where you make people get together in a classroom and do stuff. But she said, actually, this is one of the best social engagement opportunities that she has to meet new people and talk about things. And like-minded people, so upper level biology class. And so that's been a sort of fun part to it. I also, because I have to set up this camera and the whiteboards and the screens and everything, I have to get there 15, 20 minutes early to get it all set up. And I've got a handful of students who get there early, and it's like breakfast club. It's like they show up and they sit and chat about the weekend or what they're doing for Thanksgiving. And this is at 8:30 in the morning. I've never seen a Reed student in a classroom at 8:30 in the morning. But they've already gone to get their breakfast and had their breakfast, and now they're coming over here to sit and chat before class. So that's been kind of fun. Other things, I'm doing a lot of office hours virtually, but I also have done a lot of walks with students around campus. Like they show up and have some questions, and if I don't need to be looking at a computer screen or if I can do it on my phone, we go for a walk and I help them figure out what classes to take. Doesn't work so well for filling out PDF forms and stuff, but a lot of stuff we can do that way. So those are the kinds of experiences I've had teaching sort of in person and online. And the spring term is going to be different again. Like this time we went from being warm and sunny and outdoors to like getting cold and rainy. And in the spring, it's going to go the other way. And so I expect that some of the people who started out and they're, online, they're going to say, you know what, we can maybe move outdoors. If all the students happen to be in Portland, let's go sit outside, right? So I think you'll see classes move the other way come spring and the weather get nice, and you'll have more in-person activities than you might at the beginning. So I think that sort of flexibility is important for the faculty and the students. And most of us are teaching new classes in the spring. So even though we learned all kinds of stuff about how to teach this fall, under these circumstances, we're going to have to do it for a different course and different material and a different structure in the spring. So, we'll be experts by next year, but give us one more semester.
Thank you, Susie. So I'm gonna turn our time a little bit now to talk about student and campus life. And so, as we know, this is probably, again, one of the most challenging elements of campus life during the pandemic. You know, folks are trying to come together. We want to bring folks together. We're asking folks to wear masks. There's six feet physical distance, while still trying to maintain some sense of community with events and gatherings, with obviously under limitations. So I'd like Amy to talk a little bit about our residential plans and deadlines for the spring, as well as talk a little bit about some of the fall activities that we've done, but also what we're planning for the spring as well.
Sure, happy to do so. Sorry I missed introductions. I was having the dreaded Zoom problems. So I'm Amy Sheckman. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Dean of Student Campus Life. So as Carnell said, I oversee residence life, student engagement, and orientation. And yes, this semester has been very different. I think very different than most students necessarily expected when they came here. And that has definitely allowed for a lot of adjustment and pivoting and changing expectations and ways in which we connect and interact with each other. So I'll definitely talk about some of the programming that we've offered, but I'm going to try to cover some logistics and pick up some of the questions that I've seen in the chat along the way. So as many of you know, we're wrapping up the residential part of fall semester on campus very soon. It's coming up November 22nd, and most students will be departing campus at that time. We do have a small number of students who have applied for winter housing and demonstrated a need to be here, and they will be here with us during that time, and we'll be providing weekly programming and support and food services for them as well. As Julie shared, many of these students are international students as well, so that's another kind of additional challenge that some of our students haven't necessarily left campus or left Portland in probably over a year at this point, and just being very kind of cognizant of that when we are providing support for our students. We've had a lot of questions about spring. So we are approaching everything very similarly. This semester, we are able to house 820 students on campus, and we're going to be single occupancy. We do have some availability if students are interested in moving onto campus, or maybe have been studying remote, or perhaps weren't able to come because of visa issues. So if you are interested in spring housing, there's a form on the Residence Life website to fill that out. Yes, we have kind of set out what our move-in days are, and they're the January 14th, 15th, 20th, and 21st. And I think that was also covered in the announcements that went out the end of October. We know that kind of things are continually fluctuating, and we feel it is very important that students get tested upon their return to campus. The testing windows are really kind of driven by staffing, but also what the laboratory can manage. So I know there are some questions about that we might be able to handle on an individual basis. After students are tested, we're asking them to quarantine in their residence hall room or apartment until they get a negative test result. We will be using the same, I believe Madison mentioned, we'll be using the same company that we have been using this whole semester. So our students will be very used to the process, and now are actually able to log in and get their own results kind of in real time. So that has been very helpful as well. Also, when students get here, if they're arriving towards the early end, we will be hosting a virtual Paideia this year. Paideia is a re-tradition that we have pivoted to being in a digital world now. It is kind of a celebration where students, faculty, staff, alumni come together and people teach classes about things that they are passionate about. For example, one of our panelists, Britt, has frequently taught a class about traveling solo or traveling on a budget. Our Center for Life Beyond Read teaches different classes about communities of purpose. We have alumni coming in telling you about like know your rights in the law. So we're really excited to be able to open up this experience virtually, because it means students don't have to be on campus to participate, but they can be elsewhere in another country, home, anywhere. And we're also expecting some additional alumni engagement because of that as well. As far as events for spring semester, we've learned a lot so far this year. We've really learned that our students are looking for fun, lighthearted things to do. The world is very heavy right now. They're looking for things to like grab art supplies, take them back and work on them in their common room with their peers, or carving a pumpkin under our big dining hall tent. Or one of the best events, the happiest I've seen our students so far this semester was participating in a Sunday afternoon roller skating event in one of the parking lots. So we're really looking at continuing to replicate those types of programs this semester. And really, our students are doing really well with public health behaviors. We held an election watch party the other night, and I will admit I was nervous. I was like, students are gonna clump up together. And it was great. Everyone was like distant and very respectful. And I think we're really learning how we can form connections in this very kind of different environment. A couple more questions I've gotten are about the end of summer or spring. As Nora shared, we'll be following a similar format to what we did fall semester, and that spring break will be pushed back. And I believe the departure date for most students will be April 11th. As right now, we will also have students will have the option to be able to apply to stay for the remainder of the semester, and then we will be having summer housing in some form. We haven't quite worked out the details about exactly what summer housing will look like yet, but we are very aware that some students will likely have the need to be here. And then I think I had one more question about how are we recognizing seniors right now? As many of you probably know, we have a small cohort of seniors who are graduating in December and working on their theses furiously right now. And typically we have a mini thesis parade and Ren Fair celebration. Obviously, it's going to look different this year, particularly with some of our more recent guidelines in Oregon, and much of it is going to be virtual. And we're partnering with our student czars, or the students who are planning Ren Fair or spring fall right now, and trying to figure out ways. Are there ways for them to celebrate safely in person? Maybe one person with a friend burning their thesis and signing up for a time, and really trying to kind of preserve those read traditions in a safe manner.
Thank you, Amy. So we know that the spring term is just about 2 months away, and it's already hard to imagine the end of the spring term in 2021 and how we will plan to celebrate the class of 2021. So Hugh, can you share a little bit about what the college is planning for commencement and related activities?
There is some cruel irony that I have planning in my title, because we are unable to plan so much right now. And certainly commencement at Reed is one of my favorite events. It's focused around the students. It has wonderful historic elements, and we are trying to imagine how to do it. Our limitations are, number one, restrictions the state has placed on gathering size. Indoors and outdoors, anything in person is very limited right now to 50 people. At most. I would not expect that we will have any loosening of that for some time. So we are planning what we can in person with those size limitations in mind. And what that likely means is that we will aspire to present a commencement that students can participate in, perhaps in groups like departments, but it would be impossible for many of us, and I join you in wanting to be there with the students, for many of us who are not students or those presenting the degrees to be in attendance. All of you are trying to make plans for your ability to attend such an event, and we will keep you up to date as we know it. At this point, it is impossible for us to present a traditional commencement, and that's a very sad thing for me to have to report to you, but that is where we are right now. And we will, if things change, we will change.
Here. So I want to turn a little bit to start thinking about summer, and you're like, okay, we're talking about the end of the spring semester. Now we're talking about summer 2021. And so the work that Alice does in the Center for Life Beyond Read, where she and her team is making sure that every student is thinking about their academic career at Read as 4 periods of academic coursework, and then 3 periods of deep investment in their own growth and skills and experiences within their community of purpose. So Alice, share a little bit about what our students can be doing and make the most of their summer.
Yeah, thank you, Carnell, and hello, parents and families. Thank you for sending your brilliant, resilient scholars to us. So CLBR is Reed's Career, Graduate School, Professional School, and National Fellowships Advising Center, plus Employer Recruiting and Relations. And my team and I have the joy of working with your students to develop plans beyond Reed in an integrated and holistic way while they're at Reed. And this new virtual technology, I agree with Susie, it brings us closer to the students in new ways, and it allows us to be really creative in networking the students with Reed's amazing global alumni community. So I'm going to go very quickly through this because of our time. If you need to ask a question, I'm at Beyond Reed at reed.edu, and everything I mention is at reed.edu/beyond-reed. So planning for the summer. So through one-on-one advising and workshops that we run daily, we help students think about their college education as including a plan for 3 summers and 4 winter breaks in order to successfully launch from Reed. And their summer plan can be a structured activity like a now virtual internship, a paid job, research, or self-initiated like developing an app or applying for a national fellowship or augmenting their Reed education with an online data course. And we can introduce students to ideas that they may not even considered for the summer and people that they may not know. And over the summer and fall, we help them craft their new narrative based on their summer experience and start planning again. So the main thing to know is that we don't start with a question, what is it you want to do for the rest of your life? Because no student will answer that. And we're also very major agnostic. Students start by identifying what really lights them up, what issues they care about in a framework that we call communities of purpose. And starting as early as the first year, your student has one specialized advisor who's trained to help them plan all 4 years to explore their purpose. So for example, if your student's interested in sustainable life on earth or the arts and expression or the care and cure of illness, we'll be able to find and match opportunities to them that will help them develop their skills throughout their tenure at Reed. And that could include a campus job, shadows, community engagement, informal interviews or coffee chats. We love setting those up with alums, internships, research, full-time and part-time jobs, national fellowships, employer and alumni connections. And these are all available. And our work is to connect the dots for your students in a scaffolded developmental way that meets them where they are. So here's what they could be doing now. Resources for summer exploration. They can come to us for one-on-one professional advising. They have access to all of us, but primarily to their community of purpose specialized advisor. First year students work with peer career advisors. Initially, those are juniors and seniors who are trained to work with the first years. They can attend employer events. This week we had a virtual career fair with 29 employers. We're running workshops this week and next week and most weeks on either grad school, summer or winter planning, soft skills or alumni panels. We just had senior boot camp every night last week, and that'll be offered 5 more times, including during Paideia. They have access to hundreds of paid internships through the 3 curated databases that we manage, Handshake, with 1,000 employers that are interested in recruiting Reedies, Vault, and going global. In March, they can apply, or by March, for the Summer Internship Award for unpaid summer internships. We had students go to MIT, work on Senate campaigns, environmental consulting, a film center, and many more. They can apply for a career advancement fund, which is year-round, for up to $500 to explore something professional, such as a virtual conference, a virtual academic conference, or shadow an alum. They can apply for undergraduate research, which is not run through our group, but we help advise them on their research applications. There's a search tool available on our website so students can match it up. And finally, students hear about us through their CLBR advisor on Handshake. 87% of them log in on a fairly regular basis. Social media, weekly newsletter, and direct mails. It's hard to miss us. And again, thank you for sending us your wonderful students.
Thank you, Alice, for sharing. I know there are some questions that are probably still outstanding, and so we have a few minutes to be able to talk a little bit about some of those questions. So I think one of the first ones was centered around just in general around testing and access to housing and things of that nature related to quarantining. So Madison and Amy, can I have y'all answer that question a little bit?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. Thinking a little bit more about testing and access to housing and things like that, assuming we're talking about the start of the spring semester for this, we understand that it can certainly be challenging for those who are flying in or have travel arrangements that are pretty rigid. So we certainly are willing to discuss and work with you on an individual basis if you are somebody who has those extenuating circumstances. please feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, we do ask that you try to tailor your travel arrangements around the 4 designated move-in dates. If you are an on-campus student, those 4 dates of the 14th, 15th, 20th, and 21st are the dates that not only we have lab testing capacity available, but also our move-in staff are available and able to move individuals into the residence halls in a safe and effective way. So there are quite a bit of moving pieces there, which is why you see that we have limited those move-in dates and times. Unfortunately, we are unable to offer testing after 3 p.m. because of the need to get specimens to the laboratory for testing. But like I said, we do have those 4 dates, as well as the week following those move-ins. So the week of the 25th, we will be beginning our routine surveillance testing again with additional testing dates that week. So like I said, if you have rigorous travel arrangements or extenuating circumstances, please feel free to reach out to us to consult and to discuss those.
Thank you. Nora, there is a question, and it may apply to maybe a handful of parents and students around transfer credit from previous colleges and where things need to go as it relates to that. You mind providing?
Sure. I did reply to it and sent it along, but it's helpful for everyone to know that students can always look in IRIS to see what has transferred in from other schools or if AP credit has been applied. If they don't see it there, they should check in at registrar@reed.edu, send us an email, and we can double check. In many cases, students haven't sent the information to us, so we can help facilitate that. So they should look in IRIS, see what's there. They can check an Atlas to see how it applies, and then if something is missing, registrar@reed.edu, and we'll follow up.
Thank you. Alice, can you talk a little bit about what some of the things that you may recommend? Should students start preparing now for the summer, or should they be doing one-on-one meeting with one of the CLBR team members? What do you recommend on ways to get students to start thinking about this?
Yeah, thank you. Best first step, it's very easy for them to make online appointments with us through the Handshake. And we will be available, other than standard holidays, we'll be available even when they're not on campus. And that's the best way for us to begin framing the resources for them and to help set them up on the best plan for how to prepare for both winter break and summer. We like them to be considering doing an information interview during winter break or even more, and to prepare for summer, whether it's research or internships or work.
Awesome, thank you. I know, I'm sure there are going to be many more questions that folks have. And again, we want to be here and available for you to be able to answer those questions. So again, if you do have questions and they didn't get answered today, please feel free to reach out to us at student-life@reed.edu. And folks are responding to those emails very regularly. And so I wanted to, again, big shout out and a thank you to our wonderful colleagues here for providing their thoughts and feedback and sharing with you all what we are doing. This, again, it is recorded and it will be posted. And so we'll be doing follow-up after the recording is posted. So thank you all for your time today, and have a wonderful afternoon.